included, try to say fewer dumb things, and let's get to going. So again, Dustin Ross, state of Tennessee. Hi, everybody. Here to talk to you about college money. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with college money and some of you are not. So I'm just going to start at the beginning so we all have a common ground and we can start there. So college money, there is financial aid is any and all money for college. It's not just the free money from the federal government, the Pell Grant. A lot of people think that the Pell Grant is the only type of financial aid. That's not entirely accurate. When college administrators and financial aid administrators talk about financial aid, when they say use the term financial aid, it's all encompassing. It actually could mean one of four different types of aid. You'll see those pop up on your screen. You have scholarships, grants, loans, and work study. Scholarship is money based that's given to a student or awarded to a student based on merit. So a student had an ACT, a GPA, an essay that was really good, and somebody out there says, "Hey, good job. Here's some free money for school." Grants is a type of financial aid given to a family based on need. So the two most common types of grants is the federal Pell Grant. The federal Pell Grant is the process to get the federal Pell Grant is the FAFSA. I'm sure you all have heard of FAFSA. I'll talk more about that coming up. But the FAFSA is nothing more than a big math problem. It spits out an answer at the end, and the answer is a numerical answer, and that answer will dictate whether or not you're going to be Pell Grant eligible. That's the federal grant. We do have state grants in Tennessee. We don't have any fancy name for our state grants. Well, ours is called in Tennessee TSAA, but we do have some state grants as well. And again, that is money given to you, your family based off financial need in the home. Loans is a type of financial aid given to a family, and it's exactly like it sounds. It's money that you borrow for school with the intent to repay after you graduate. I will talk more about federal money and loans on its own slide coming up. But the last one up here is my personal favorite, is the Federal Work Study Program. I worked on a college campus for 17 years before going to work for the state, and 10 of those years in a director's role, I had a federal work study student work for me all 10 of those years. Federal Work Study is a program where you work on a college campus about 10 hours a week and you make about $1,000 a semester. It is a college job. You students work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. They work around their class schedule. They work around holidays. The jobs themselves are not incredibly difficult, but the schools do a really good job to try to place students within their academic discipline. In other words, if you're a nursing major and you're going to be selected for the work study program, the school will do their best job to place nursing students in the nursing work study positions if there are any of those available. So that's the best example I could give you. To get on the work study radar, if you're interested in that for your student, you need to go to the financial aid office at the institution that you're going to attend, and you need to tell them that you're interested in participating in the federal work study program. They'll collect all your information or your student's information, and they will put it on a list. That list is kind of separated into a hierarchy of need, and depending on where you fall on the list is whether or not you could get selected for the federal work study program. If you definitely don't disclose to them, you surely won't get selected. And so if that is a program that interests you and you're interested in a college job where the federal work study actually pays the school and the school pays you, so it doesn't come out of the school's money, you need to go by the financial aid office and let them know that you're interested. So those are the four types of aid. Where does all that money come from? Well, there's actually four different places where that money comes from. You have the federal program is first. So up on your screen, you'll see the first source, the primary source of financial aid is the federal government. That is the federal Pell Grant. That is that $1 billion program where they give out money for school based off financial need. That is the FAFSA is the the application system, the application program to receive the federal Pell Grant. You cannot receive any of this other aid. Well, that's not entirely true. There's a bunch of this aid up on the screen that you will not have access to unless you submit the FAFSA. So much so, let's talk about state aid. So coming down here, you have your Tennessee Promise and your Hope Scholarship, which most of you are probably familiar with. In Tennessee, you cannot and you will not receive Hope or Promise unless you submit the FAFSA. That's why it's listed up top. That's why it's first. It is Tennessee law that we will not award Promise or Hope money unless you submit a FAFSA. Okay? Be perfectly clear on that one. It is absolutely required. So you've got Tennessee Promise, you have Hope. We have a bunch of other tertiary or secondary scholarships in the state. We actually have 17 different types of aid available to your families and students. They're all very, once you get past Promise and Hope and Reconnect, they all get very nichey, very specific. And so there's a list of those that could be made available to you and some handouts that we will make available to you after tonight. So federal's first, that's the Pell Grant, state second. Then you have additional avenues like college money on your left and private money on your right. Let's talk about college money first. College money is institutional scholarships. So, I'm in Cookeville. You all are probably, I think I have on tonight, Wilson Central and Merrol Hyde. So that means y'all are in Wilson and Sumner counties. So the closest schools to you geographically are Vol State, Cumberland, MTSU. So this is your Vol State, Cumberland, MTSU scholarships. You cannot receive institutional specific scholarships until you've been admitted to the institution. So let me say that differently. If you want MTSU scholarships, you have to be admitted to MTSU first. Once you're admitted to the school will assign you or your student a student identification number. That is the number that you will use to apply for institutional scholarships. There's a little U research underneath college on your screen. What that means to you is there is no state mandate from us at our level to tell colleges when they have to close their scholarship deadline. So they're all over the place. That's why you need to research when the scholarship deadline is so you don't miss it. Those scholarship programs, those institutional scholarship programs are so big that they don't care about you individually. They care about the group clearly, but if an individual student misses the scholarship deadline, there's no way to get that taken back. There's no get out of jail free card. It's too big to allow that. So you need to research, parents and students, when your scholarship deadline is, so that way you don't miss it. There's two rules of thumb when it comes to scholarship deadlines. The more competitive the institution you're interested in attending. So let me say like your UTKs, Vanderbilt, Rhodes, Sewanee, University of the South, those highly competitive institutions typically have earlier scholarship deadlines. So you're going to want to check into those quickly. But I will tell you all four-year schools in Tennessee, and I mean all four public schools, four-year public schools in Tennessee, and I'm almost certain it's the same with private, but they will all have scholarship deadlines that expire this fall semester prior to Christmas. I believe the last date for the last one is probably December the 15th. So if you're interested in applying for institutional scholarships for next year, for next fall, and you're targeting to go to a four-year school, you need to make sure you don't miss that deadline because it will expire this fall, and you don't want to miss that. On the other side, you've got private scholarships. There's kind of two big types. Your larger national scholarships like Chick-fil-A and Coca-Cola, your more local scholarships like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, credit unions, those kinds of things. There's another U research on that side, and what this is meant to remind you, for me to tell you, is that there's a lot of scholarship jargon out there when it comes to scholarships. You need to do your research when you're applying for scholarships to learn what some of these terms mean. Is it renewable? Is it non-renewable? What are the terms for renew? If it's non-renewable, can you reapply? If you can reapply, for what are the term limits for reapplication? Lots of technical jargon things that are in the scholarship world that you need to familiarize yourself with, and you can do that without much effort. So what I would say, usually when I say this when I'm in front of an audience, and I'll still say it to you all, job number one of a graduating senior, if you need more money for school because you're attending a highly competitive institution or your family just doesn't have access to a lot of resources, the federal Pell Grants slice of or pie of money is really, really big, but your slice is kind of small. The same way in Tennessee Promise, Hope Scholarship, those pies are very big. Your slices are very small. Families, if you need more money for school, that doesn't come from the federal government, doesn't come from the state, doesn't even come from the institution. That comes from private scholarships. That comes from your student submitting 3 to 5 applications for scholarships between now and graduation. If he or she does that, submits 3 to 5 a week between now and graduation, you'll have submitted somewhere between, 60 to 75 applications for scholarship. If 10% of those hit at $1,000 a piece, you're looking at additional $6,000 to $7,500 that stacks on top of your federal money, your state money, your college money. So you need to treat that like your job. Speaking to students through parents and whoever's on here, that needs to be treated like that. Don't wait till the last minute. It's just too big of a mountain to climb. If you get in the habit of setting aside, I don't know, Tuesdays from 7 to 8 p.m., once you get over the learning curve of the jargon and some of the search mechanisms and search criteria and search engines on where I'm going to tell you to go, you get really familiar with it, and it gets pretty quick. So that you need to treat that like your job. I don't have my handout in front of me that normally I would do, but I'll make that available to you all afterwards. There are two websites that I'm going to recommend, and let's see if I can do this live. Studentscholarships.org and fastweb.com. So those are two scholarship repository sites that we recommend from the state. They are not our websites. They are websites that we are comfortable in recommending. They don't collect and resell your data. You go to these websites. You can use search criteria to search up all types of different kinds of scholarships. They have you'd think there's crazy scholarships out there: left-handed scholarships, red-headed scholarships, Lego scholarships, pogo stick scholarships. They're all over the place. There are tens upon tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars that go unawarded every year because students just don't apply for them because they think either somebody else is more qualified or they just think that the statistical chance of them getting it so small, they just don't do it. If you disregard all of that and you just go through and submit these 3 to 5 applications a week, I know it sounds funny, but it will pay off. So did you not see them in the chat? The two websites, did they pop up where you could see them in the chat? So there is no limit. Good question. There's no limit to the amount of private scholarships a student can receive. The best case scenario is the student receives so many private scholarships that the student will get paid to go to school. So if there's $10,000 in tuition and fees, but the student is accepting $15,000 in private scholarships, that means $5,000 goes into your pocket or into your bank account, whatever you want to do. That's the best ideal situation when it comes to private scholarships. Do you have to be accepted to the institution before applying for scholarships? You don't, but private scholarships will ask you where you're going to attend. Okay, they will ask you, so that way, if you're awarded the scholarship, that's where they will send their money. Great question. If you submit your application for private scholarship and you're going to Tennessee Tech, but at some point in time you're awarded the scholarship, at some point in time you change your mind to MTSU, they will all have mechanisms for you to get back into to update your institution for them so they know where to send your money. Okay. Your private scholarships will follow your student everywhere. There might be a little delay in moving the money around if it's a last minute kind of decision difference where you're going here and you decide to go over there. So it may not happen immediately, but it will. The money will eventually get to the institution, and there's no limit to how much money a student can be awarded in private scholarships. Great questions. Yes, UTK does stack scholarships. Or do they consider private schools part of your financial aid package? No, they stack private scholarships on top of their federal, state, and college aid, just like I described. All right, great questions. Let's see, I'm hopping back over, so forgive me if more chat things come in. I'll have to get to them at the end. So everybody likes a good checklist. Here is a senior year checklist. I don't talk about all of these when I do presentations, but I will say I'll hit on the quote unquote most important ones. If applying for scholarships, private scholarships, is job number one as a senior, job number two is this first bullet point. That's to become Hope Scholarship eligible by the time you graduate. Hope Scholarship eligibility is either a 21 on your ACT or a 3.0 unweighted GPA. All right, 21 on your ACT or either a 3.0 unweighted GPA. Again, I believe tonight is Wilson Central and Merrol Hyde. Wilson Central, your GPAs are weighted, which means they can be above the traditional 4.0 scale. So one of two things need to happen if you're at Wilson Central. You need to log into whatever student information system you all use, like Skyward or I don't know, there's a bunch of them. And you need to see if you can identify an unweighted or a Hope GPA on your digital transcript. If you're unable to do that, you need to check in with your counselor to learn what your unweighted GPA is, or your Hope Scholarship GPA. Schools call it different things, so just make sure that it's the 3.0 on the 4.0 unweighted scale. The 21 on your ACT is a one-time sit. It is not a super score. So just to reiterate, Hope Scholarship eligibility, 21 one-time sit or 3.0 unweighted GPA. You get to one of those thresholds, not both. You only need one. It's an or. If you get to 21 or 3.0, you will be awarded the Hope Scholarship. The total payout for a Hope Scholarship is about $30,000 over the lifespan of the scholarship, so you definitely don't want to leave that money on the table. Job one, applying for private scholarships. Job number two, making sure you become Hope eligible by the time you graduate. For Hope, you do have to attend a Tennessee college. That's correct. State money does not cross state lines. So great question. So state money does not cross state lines. So next on here is your Tennessee Promise application deadline of November the 3rd. What I will say is, even if your plans are to not attend a Tennessee Promise institution, if your plans are to go straight to a four-year school or go out of state or whatever else, you need to submit the Tennessee Promise application for insurance purposes. I'd rather you have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Every year I've done this job, over 20 years, I have a student or family come to me every fall that their plan A fell through, and their plan A was not a Tennessee Promise institution, but their plan A fell through and they needed to make a last minute adjustment. Is there anything that could be done because they didn't submit the application on time or by the deadline? And unfortunately, at that point, there is nothing that can be done. So just submit the application by the deadline, and hopefully, if your plan A doesn't include a Tennessee Promise institution, you will, then great. But if you need it, it's there if you have to have it. All right. There is the FAFSA deadline is, the FAFSA launches October 1st. I'll talk more about that in a slide coming up. But the FAFSA deadline for Tennessee Promise and State is April 1st, 2026. April 1st, 2026. If you're unfamiliar with how the process works, if you've never actually gone through it or had a student go through it, the short version, parents, I'm going to speak specifically to you, is your student gets admitted, applies to the school sometime this fall. They get admitted sometime this fall. In the middle of the spring semester, the schools that they have been admitted to will reach out to them and say, hey, it's time for you to register for freshman orientation so you can come to campus, get familiar with the campus, do all the things. And at that freshman orientation program, students will register for their classes. So once a student registers for classes, that's the moment that the institution can actually execute a bill for you. They're not able to do that because there's nothing to charge you for yet. So once classes have been registered for, they then can create a bill for you all to see. What happens at that point, on that last bullet point on your screen, is compare financial aid packages. Once you've gone to the campus and once you've registered for classes, the school can now prepare what's called a financial aid package. They have to do this by federal law. They have to disclose all their fees. They have to be sent to you prior to the beginning of the fall, so that way you can you're financially prepared for what it's going to cost you out of pocket, and you can kind of create an analysis of comparison between institutions if you're looking at more than one. So sometime in early summer of 2026, each of you will receive a financial aid package from the institution, and they will all be a little different, but more or less the critical parts are the same. They'll have three different columns, three different portions. Column one will be all the fees and charges that you're responsible for, what the tuition is, what the fees are, if you're living on campus, housing, meals. It will list everything on there that the institution says this is what you have to pay for, and this is what it's going to cost you. Column B will be all the money you have coming in the form of financial aid. That is your federal Pell Grant, that is your state grant, that is your state scholarship, that is your private institutional scholarship, that is your institutional scholarships, those are your private scholarships, your national and your local scholarships. You'll see all that money listed in column B. And then column C is the difference. The difference in that either you have too much money coming in, so you're going to get a refund check, or you don't have enough money coming in, and this is going to be the portion that you're responsible to pay out of pocket. So once you get familiar with that, once you see one, you can clearly make your way through it if you're comparing two or more institutions that you've gone into orientation sessions and registered for classes. So that is what you can expect to receive in the beginning to middle of next summer prior to enrolling for next fall. I saw a question come through. Do all Tennessee schools take Hope? I need clarity to answer that. So, do all TBR schools take Hope? Yes. Do all UT system schools take Hope? Take Hope? Yes. There are plenty of private and for-profit institutions in state that are not Hope eligible. So we do have a list on collegefortn.org, our website. Then you can go to collegefortn.org and you can search criteria Hope eligible institutions, and it will tell you what the Hope eligible institutions in state are. So I can't just say yes that because there are plenty of schools in Tennessee that are not Hope eligible. So you need to make sure you've done your homework beforehand to make sure it's a Hope eligible institution before you go. Great question. Let's see. Let's plug forward. Cost of attendance. I get to this slide and everybody's eyeballs in public get real big because there's a bunch of big numbers up on here. What I do want to hone in on is really just that you're prepared for what's going to need to be come out of your pocket to cover costs. So in other words, up on your screen, you'll see, let's pick on that first column, that 2-year public community college. So you'll see that typical tuition at a community college is $2,500 a semester or $5,000 a year. All right. By federal law, every institution has to disclose what their estimated cost of attendance is. And so estimated cost of attendance will always be more than mandatory tuition and fees because schools know and everybody knows in financial aid that there's more costs associated with college than just tuition and fees. There's tuition, fees, there's books, there's gas, there's food, there's travel, there's rent, there is utilities, there's insurance, there's leisure, there's all kinds of different things that students and families are responsible to pay, and those will always be well above and beyond mandatory tuition and fees. Kind of a general rule of thumb is that the public institutions, your estimated total cost of attendance is double what the mandatory tuition and fees are. And so if you're looking at the 2-year public and the 2-year private, that's really close. Tuition at 2-year public is $5,000, tuition at 4-year public is $10,000. Total estimated cost of attendance is $10,000 and $25,000. The schools have to include all of those fees, even if your student is living at home. Because even if they're living at home, somebody's covering that money. Somebody is, they're not paying rent, but you're paying a mortgage. That money is still accounted for in the equation for total estimated cost of attendance. So I say all that to say, just make sure that you have done your homework and you know what the total estimated cost of attendance is for the institution that you want to attend. So that way you're not caught off guard financially when it comes time to sign the dotted line or make things happen next fall, right? So just it takes a little bit of homework, a little bit of planning, and if you do that, then you want to be able to know what the total estimated cost of attendance is for your institution, know how much aid you have coming in, and then you subtract that aid from the total cost of attendance. And then you have your actual what's going to cost you out of pocket, or if you're going to get an excess aid check when it's all said and done with. All right, so we have here's our first, we're moving into the money stuff. Our first, this is the federal government slide. At this first column on your left is going to, and this is, you'll see this one in the next 3 or 4 slides. You have the Pell Grant. That is the FAFSA, that is the federal Pell Grant. If, as I mentioned, the FAFSA is nothing more than a big math problem. You submit a FAFSA and it actually spits out a numerical answer. That numerical answer you can see on your screen is called a student aid index. A student aid index. That number can reside anywhere between negative 1,500 to as big as you can imagine. So if your number is between negative 1,500 and 0, you'll be considered what is full Pell eligible. All right, full Pell eligible. If you're full Pell, then you can see up on your screen that payout is $3,700 a semester or $7,400 a year. If you're your family or full Pell, 37 a semester or $7,400 a year. All right. If you need loans for school, if you're attending a highly competitive institution, or if you need don't have a lot of access to resources, there are loans made available to you. That those are the federal loans that you see, the little yellow columns over here. To be perfectly clear, you cannot apply for these federally backed loans unless you have submitted a FAFSA. So if you need a federal loan and you want a federal loan because they do have the best interest rates, you cannot, my screen advanced, you cannot apply for those federal loans unless you've submitted a FAFSA. The only thing I say about loans when I talk about loans is that, we're all, I don't know, I can't see your faces, but I assume most of us are grown-ups in here. Just know what you're borrowing before you borrow it. Understand the loan stipulations, understand what the interest rate is, understand when it begins to accrue, understand when the repayment terms are, when they begin. Just know what you're borrowing before you do it. But what I hone in on when I talk about loans is just whatever you do, families, don't commit the cardinal sin of college loans. And that is you borrow X amount of thousands of dollars for school, or your student borrows X amount of $1,000 for school, and he or she either leaves the institution or they're asked to leave the institution. Now you have significant debt and you don't have a great way to pay it off. And that's a recipe for disaster. So if you need a loan, I get it and understand it and I support it, but you need to have honest conversations with yourselves about, is there any other way? And are you so committed to the goal that college provides that you know you're going to see it through? Because it's a big deal to borrow lots of thousands of dollars and then something happen and then you don't have a great way to pay it off. That is like the cardinal sin of college loans. So plowing forward, we're going to see that same federal Pell Grant on this slide. Now we're talking about money at four-year schools. Money at four-year schools. Up on your screen, left to right, you'll see that first column. That's the federal Pell Grant. Full Pell eligibles, $3,700 a semester, $7,400 a year. In Tennessee, if you have an SAI between -1,500 and 5,000, so our parameters are a bit more broad than the federal system. But if you have an SAI between -1,500 and 5,000, you receive an automatic supplement from us called TSAA. That will come to an additional $1,000 at a semester at a public institution or $2,000 a semester at a private institution. All right. There is no application for TSAA. There's nothing you need to check, nothing you need to do. If you've submitted the FAFSA and your SAI is between -1,500 and 0, we automatically send the money. Okay. There in the middle, you see the Hope Scholarship. Hope Scholarship, again, is 21 or 3.0. If your student becomes Hope eligible, you can see the payout award amount there at the bottom. The payout for freshmen and sophomores is $2,250 a semester. Then it goes up to $2,850 for your junior, senior, and super senior year. And I'll talk more about Hope in just a second, but $4,500 a year, $5,700 for freshmen and sophomores, $5,700 a year for junior, senior, super senior. And then if you're Hope eligible, the column in the middle, we have two additional supplements over on the right. Aspire is you have an adjusted gross income of $36,000 or less. That payout is $750 a semester. And we have over on the far right is called our General Assembly Merit Scholarship, or GAMS. GAMS is if you're a high achieving student and you have a 29 ACT and a 3.75, we'll send an additional $500 to your institution for that scholarship, for that supplement. If you are the rare student that is both Aspire and GAMS eligible, for whatever reason, I don't know why, we do not pay them both out. We only pay out the higher of the two, which means you would only receive Aspire. So just make sure you're aware, if you're marking these down, that if you think you're projected to receive both Aspire and GAMS, then you would only receive the higher of the two. What I will say, additionally, if you were to go back a couple of slides and talk about that financial aid package, where I want to try to slow down and hone in on, parents and students, you need to know exactly what money you have coming in to for your scholarships, and so that way when you get your financial aid package, you can check off all the things that you're projected to receive. In other words, if you know you have the 29 and the 375, and you get your financial aid package and you see GAMS is missing, that's when you reach out to us to say, hey, Dustin, my student is GAMS eligible, but it's not showing up on their financial aid package. What do we need to do? And then we hop in and go from there. There's tens of thousands of students doing this for this next year, and so it does happen. So you need to know what money you're expected to come in so you can check it off on a list when you see it on your financial aid package. All right. Last thing I want to mention on this slide, go back to the Hope Scholarship in the middle. Hope Scholarship is 5 calendar years. So if you graduate in May 2026, you'll start college fall 2026, which means your Hope Scholarship would expire May 2031. So state law changed last year, the year before, I don't even remember. State law changed where Hope Scholarship can now be used towards your first advanced degree. So students, more and more students are finishing high school with AP credit and dual enrollment credit. They've got 20, 30, 40, 50 hours. There's some, more and more students are finishing with their associate's degree, which means if you graduate with your bachelor's degree and you have 3, 4, 5 semesters of Hope Scholarship remaining, you can now use that Hope Scholarship money towards your first advanced degree. So Hope pays 5 years or until you've earned your first advanced degree. We pay for all types of advanced degree programs. Those are your master's degree programs, your professional degrees like your dental school, law school, PT school, medical school, all those things. We cover those until you've either earned the degree or the 5 years have expired. So that's a really cool, really cool law that we added a year or two ago that benefits students and families since more and more students are finishing school early with their degrees. Take advantage of that. If you've ever thought about an advanced degree program, please take advantage of that so that way it is you don't leave money on the table. So those are the 4-year schools. Let's hop into community colleges. The first column, a lot of this is the same. Some of them payouts different. First column's identical. You got the Pell Grant system on the left. Student aid index, if it's between -1,500 and 0, that means you're full Pell eligible. $3,700 a semester or $7,400 a year. If your SAI is between -1,500 and 5,000, TSAA supplement will hit your account for $1,000 a semester at a community college. Hope threshold to earn it's the same, 21 or 3.0. Payout is different at $1,600 a semester as opposed to $2,250. Aspire and GAMS are the same thresholds to earn it, $36,000 or less in adjusted gross income or 29 and 375 GPA. Aspire payouts different at $250 as opposed to $750, but GAMS is identical. It pays out $500. So the difference on this screen compared to the other one is you have that last column on your screen which says Tennessee Promise, which means if the community college tuition is $2,500 a semester and you have $400 coming in from each individual column up on your screen, that means you have a $500 difference at the end. So Tennessee Promise then pays that $500 difference at the end, so you're not responsible for it. Tennessee Promise is called a last dollar scholarship. So last dollar scholarship means that scholarship only pays at the end after all other scholarships and financial aid has hit their account. It's never paid first. It's only paid last. All right. That's community colleges. TCATs. TCATs operate on trimesters as opposed to semesters. So the dollars look a little different up on your screen, but dollar for dollar, they have the same value as it does at the community colleges and the 4-year school. So if you're full Pell eligible at a TCAT, that payout's $2,165 a trimester. If your SAI is between -1,500 and 5,000, that payout at $667 per trimester. TCATs use Wilder NAFI. They don't use the Hope Scholarship. So Wilder NAFI is the Hope Scholarship for TCATs. And so in order to become Wilder NAFI eligible, all you'd have to do is graduate from your school. If you graduate, if you get your diploma, then you're Wilder NAFI eligible, and we will send $667 to your school on your behalf. And again, just like the previous community college slide, that Tennessee Promise column on the far right, if you have any money left over that you're responsible to pay after all this other money has hit your account, then Promise kicks in and pays the difference. So for your mandatory tuition and fees, and then there's going to be a zero balance at the end, or close to a zero balance. Let's go through one more slide to just make sure we're all on the same page. Here we have 4 examples of community college, students going to community college, 4 examples of aid and how it works. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Up on your slide, we're going to use again the community college tuition and fee as the example. You'll see the dotted line there in the middle, and you'll see the $2,500 in tuition across that dotted line. And student number 1, this student is receiving the Hope Scholarship because of the ACT or the GPA, and they're full Pell because they're either have an SAI between -1,500 and 0, which also means they're getting the supplement from Tennessee for additional $1,000. So this student has $1,600, $3,700, $6,300 coming in against $2,500 in tuition. Hold that thought. I'll circle back to that in just a second. Student number 2 does not receive Hope because of the ACT or GPA, but they are full Pell eligible, which means they're getting a supplement from us. So student number 2 is getting $4,700 sent to the school against $2,500 in tuition. So what this means to you, and I'm only going to talk to moms and dads for just a second. What this means to you, mom and dad, student number 1 is going to get a refund check for $3,800. Student number 2 is going to get a refund check for $2,200. Mom and dads, these checks are made out to your students in their name. It is not your name. It is in their name. You need to have a conversation about where is this money going to go, who has access to it, how it's going to be spent, so that way this money just doesn't get deposited in an account and it just floats away to things that are floatable, because happens all the time. If you think you are going to be a student that's possibly in columns 1 or 2, if you think your scenario is 1 or 2 and you're possibly getting a $1, $2, $3, $4,000 refund check, y'all need to have a mature conversation about where that money is going to go and how it's going to be used so it doesn't get blown. Example number 3 is the one and only time students can receive both Hope and Promise in the same semester. So student number 3 is getting the Hope Scholarship because of the ACT or GPA, but they are not getting any of the grant money because their parents make too much money. So Hope Scholarship hits their account first. So that's why you see the $1,600 and you see the $900 difference above it. That means Hope kicks in and pays the difference so on their mandatory tuition and fees. So the student has a 0 balance on those fees. Last example, number 4, is the student did not have the grades and the parents made too much money, but they did the stipulations to be Promise eligible. So Promise pays everything, all mandatory tuition and fees. I know I've said mandatory tuition and fees like 6 times now. Let me briefly explain what that means. Mandatory tuition and fees means there are some fees that colleges use that are non-mandatory that students still have to pay that are not covered by Tennessee Promise. A lab fee, an online book fee. They're creative with their fees. So Promise does not cover books. So there are some. So even though Promise it gets you to tuition free, don't be surprised if you get ready for the fall and you have a 30, 60, maybe upwards of even to $100 bill, because there's a real possibility that some of your students could register for things that have non-mandatory fees included, which you'll be responsible to pay out of pocket. All right. I hope that explains how Tennessee Promise works. I hope that explains the power and the value of Tennessee Promise and why it's beneficial for you to make sure you do the things required for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship, because you'll see up on your screen now, there is no ACT or GPA. There's no academic requirement to earn the Tennessee Promise. There are only 4 things up here on your screen to earn Tennessee Promise. There's the deadline of November the 3rd, 2025. The Tennessee Promise FAFSA deadlines, April 1st, 2026. You have mandatory Tennessee Achieves meetings at your schools that your student must go to. And if he or she doesn't attend that Tennessee Achieves meeting, then they're out. Promise is gone. And then last but not least, they have to submit 16 hours in community service every year they're in school and projected to receive Tennessee Promise. I'll slow here for emphasis, and you can follow up with your counselor, but Wilson Central has the Tennessee Achieves meeting is on December the 3rd at 8:40 a.m. and Merrol Hyde's Tennessee Achieves meeting is on December the 2nd at 1 p.m. All right, so these are meetings that you don't want to miss. If you need clarification on when that meeting is, you can reach out to the school counselor to ask when it is, and they'll give you the stipulations about whether or not where the meeting is, if parents are eligible to attend. Some schools allow parents to attend, some schools do not. Tennessee Achieves doesn't care if parents can attend, but schools set the stipulations on whether or not parents can attend. Tennessee Achieves does not. So you need to check in with your school counselor to ask to verify if that is a meeting where schools can attend the meeting or not. So again, if you need those meeting dates, circle back to your counselors. But Wilson Central is December the 3rd at 8:40 a.m. Merrol Hyde is December the 2nd at 1 p.m. If your student's graduating early in December, they can graduate and immediately enroll in college in January and use Tennessee Promise or the Hope Scholarship. If they plan to do that, they have some different timelines and stipulations to be able to use those scholarships right after graduation. All these slides will be shared with you, so don't have to worry about remembering this now. Just know that if your student's planning on graduating in December and immediately enrolling in January, there's different stipulations and timeframes that you need to complete in order to make that happen. If your student's graduating in December and they're not enrolling until the following fall, you don't need to do anything different. The previous slide for the Tennessee Promise checklist will work just fine. There's nothing unique that needs to happen at that point. This is only for students graduating in December and immediately enrolling in January as a college student and with the intent to use Tennessee Promise or Hope Scholarship. If that's you, talk to me afterwards when you get my contact information, or talk to your counselor so we can explain those steps and how to go about doing it. So we're going to pivot now kind of away from the state money and more towards the federal stuff. We have a pretty cool website, and they pay me to say that, but we have a pretty cool website. What I will say, of all the things on our College for TN website, the most important one I think is beneficial to parents is up on your screen now. And that is, if you go to collegefortn.org, you'll see our drop-down menu up at the top. If you click on Money for College, the drop-down menu will pop down, and you'll see right there in the middle left how to fill out the FAFSA. A couple of years ago, the FAFSA went through some great adjustments, and it was very difficult. It has been greatly improved since then, but it's still kind of intimidating for parents and people if they've never done it. So I recommend everybody attempting to do the FAFSA on your own once it launches October the 1st. But if you go to our website, collegefortn.org, and you can scroll down at the bottom of that page, and there's 6 different 3-minute videos on each section of the FAFSA. You can literally watch a section of the FAFSA and then go and complete that portion on your own. Watch the next section, complete the next section. Rinse and repeat until you're done. It will walk you through step by step until you get your FAFSA submitted. All right, that is the best resource. There's a bunch of great resources on our site, but for FAFSA and financial aid purposes, that's the best resource that I can communicate and recommend you use to help you complete that FAFSA on your own. All right, so let's talk about FAFSA. We'll spend the majority of the rest of our time together here. So you're going to be submitting the 26-27 FAFSA. This is because your student is enrolling fall 26 into spring 27. All right. The 26-27 FAFSA, you will use your 2024 income tax return information in order to submit that FAFSA. All right. As I mentioned, that deadline is April the 1st. In order to submit a FAFSA, everybody must create what's called an FSA ID. I'll talk more about that on the next screen. But to submit a FAFSA, it requires a student FSA ID and a student portion, and a parent FSA ID and a parent portion. A FAFSA is not and cannot be submitted until the student half is done and the parent half is done. All right. I'm going to hop back and forth between the next 2 slides to make sure we're clear. When I say FSA ID is nothing more than your FAFSA username and password. FSA ID is just the term that the FAFSA folks created to refer to your FAFSA username and password. It's not a physical ID that you receive in the mail. It's nothing that you print and keep. It's just your username and password to log into your FAFSA account, okay? So as I mentioned, to submit a FAFSA, a student FSA ID and a student portion, parent FSA ID and parent portion. So we get now into the questions about, okay, which parents need to create FSA IDs? There's kind of 3 general rules of thumb for this process, for this question that it comes up. Number 1, parents, if you are married and you file jointly, you only need 1 FSA ID. If you're married, file jointly, you represent each other financially, and you only need 1 FSA ID because you can submit the FAFSA on the other parent's behalf. All right. If you're married and file any other way, that means you need 2 FSA IDs. Okay, so that's the second general rule of thumb. First, married file jointly, 1 FSA ID. Married file any other way, 2 FSA IDs. After that, then you get into the scenarios and the very complicated and multifaceted scenarios of divorce, separation, remarriage. Um, Most times, that will only involve the student and the student portion and one parent FSA ID and one parent portion most times. So I would say that if that if you so the FAFSA is looking for total household income, and so if you all the parents that live inside the home, and when I say parents, I mean that can be biological parents, that can mean bio mom, stepdad, that can mean just dad, that can mean biological parents that are not married. And if that's the scenario, because if they're not married, they can't file a joint return, which means they need 2 FSA IDs. FAFSA wants household income. You have to account for the parents in the household, their total income. So if that is a biological parent that has remarried, then it will be the biological parent plus the remarried spouse or the spouse who is not biological dad. Any of those combinations would still probably only result in one parent FSA ID and parent portion and one student FSA ID and student portion. Okay. There are always wonky scenarios where we might need 2 FSA IDs, but those kind of get very specific at that point, and we can answer those in an email or a phone call outside of a presentation like this. One of the other questions I usually get live and in person when doing this is, Dustin, I created an FSA ID. I went back to school 10 years ago, or I graduated 10 years ago, and I have an FSA ID. Can I create another one? The answer is no. Once you have created an FSA ID, you cannot create another FSA ID because your social security number was used. It's the unique qualifier to create your FSA ID. So once you've done it, it cannot, another one cannot be created. So, okay, Dustin, if I created my account and I still have an account, but I no longer have access to the information on the account, what do I do? There's only two solutions for that problem. So again, if you created an FSA ID, and the feds keep their FSA IDs about 15 years, I've seen it as long as 18 is the longest I've seen, but they are supposed to keep them only for about 15. They keep them for 15 years, and if your account is still there, but you no longer have access to the information to be able to reset your password or get access to the account to reset your information, your first solution is, if you're married, file jointly, have your spouse do it, because you don't want to have to do the other solution. So if you don't have access to previous information, but you're married and file jointly, please just fix the problem, and that is have your spouse do it. And so that way you don't have to do this other mechanism, because I'm going to go back a slide now. If you created your FSA ID and you don't have access to be able to reset your credentials, you have to call the 800 number up on your screen, the dreaded FAFSA number. You got to talk to them. That is the only path forward for you. If you don't have a spouse that can represent you and you can't get access to account that you previously created, you have to call them to get your account unlocked. All right. That is the only path forward for you. I think that's everything I want to say for parents at that point. Let's see here. I'm going to hold while I mute. Sweet. So I think that's it I want to say for parents. I'll circle back if there's anything else I want to say. The FAFSA was created with the intent where a parent or a student could start the FAFSA, and but what we saw when it went live a couple of years ago is that we saw better success with students starting it first and inviting the parent to participate, and parents doing it second. So the FAFSA has been updated this off season, but we haven't had a chance to test it yet, so I don't know if that's still going to be the case. So for now, we're recommending all people to have the student do their portion first and then invite their parent to participate, and the parent do their portion second. Okay, parent do their portion second. There are some changes that happened with the FAFSA this year as opposed to last year. The last 2 years, the FAFSA required a mandatory 3 to 5 day identification verification process. That has been removed. So if you're creating your FSA ID and you have a social security number, your FSA ID will be verified immediately and you can submit the FAFSA the same day. If you do not have the social security number, you still can create an FSA ID, but it's got to go through the identification verification process, which can take a few days to make that happen. Another big change that happened from last year to this year is last 2 years, students had to know parents' social security numbers in order to submit a FAFSA. That has changed. Thank goodness that has changed to where now the students will enter in parents' email address. And when the student does that and they finish their part of the FAFSA, it will generate a random code. The student will provide the parent with the random code. When the parent clicks the link to connect the FAFSAs, the parent will enter the random code and it will connect the two FAFSAs and join them together so that it can be submitted at that point. That's a new cool process where students no longer have to know parents' social security numbers, and they can be able to create their FSA IDs and submit that to parents on the same day now. Here's a FAFSA checklist. I'm not going to go through this on a presentation. We will share these slides out with you. But what I will say is when you have this in front of you and you get ready to do your FAFSA, have all this information in front of you before you sit down and get prepared to go through submitting your FAFSA. Just make sure the data is in front of you so you don't miss something. It's going to be the same thing with your assets. These are all the assets that FAFSA considers that you need to list on the FAFSA or doesn't consider. You see the two columns. So when you get ready to do your FAFSA, just know what these monies are before you get ready to do your FAFSA so you can enter them in while you're filling it out. And again, this will be shared with you. I get questioned a lot about my student is 18, they're moving out of my house, they're paying their own rent, I don't pay any more of their money, so they're going to file the FAFSA as independent. Probably not. Even if they are living outside of your home, paying their own rent, paying their own bills, and you do not technically support them financially, unless they meet the burden of proof of one of these bullet points up on your screen, they are still dependent on you. So they have not met the threshold for independent status unless they have satisfied one of these bullet points up on your screen. So I will pause here and say, grandparents never create FSA IDs and submit a FAFSA unless grandparents have legally adopted their grandchild. Once a legal adoption has happened, that grandparent becomes the legal parent, and they would then submit a FAFSA at that point. However, if a grandparent was granted court guardianship prior to legal adoption, then one of the questions on the FAFSA is, has anyone other than a biological parent ever had legal guardianship review? And if that answer is yes, then you can see legal guardianship on that screen. And that means the student would be considered independent and we would not need that grandparent's information, and they receive the full benefit of the federal Pell Grant system. So there are a few nuances on these bullet points, and I can clarify those on one-on-ones or any follow-up messages. But generally speaking, unless they meet the threshold for these bullet points, they're going to be dependent on your tax return information to submit a FAFSA. FAFSA is required every year they're in school and receiving money in Tennessee. So, do you have to submit a FAFSA? Technically, you don't. Nobody technically has to, but if you're going to receive Tennessee money and you're going to get that every year, you got to submit a FAFSA every year. More and more colleges, and the word is really probably most colleges now, require the FAFSA to award their own aid because the college wants access to the federal money. So just get in the habit of doing it. I get a lot of families, out up here where I live that they don't want to submit a FAFSA because they don't want to share their information, and they already got your information. You might as well just do it so you get some free money. So, but just know that the FAFSA is required every year. My recommendation is set a calendar reminder in your phone or device for every October 15th, every year for the next 4 to 6 years. And once you get that calendar reminder every year, you'll know that the FAFSA launched 2 weeks ago and you need to do it the next weekend. Just make that your FAFSA weekend. Get do your FAFSA, watch some football, grill some food, and make a thing of it. But go ahead and do it early, get it out of the way, because if there's any hiccups, those can be addressed prior to the deadline and get them done. So just best rule of thumb or best advice I could give you is set a reminder, calendar reminder, October 15th every year. Do it the next weekend and have it be done. I mentioned this one earlier, but just to be perfectly clear, Tennessee money cannot cross state lines, cannot be used at an out-of-state institution, does not, will not, it doesn't even. So I get questioned a lot about, what about our bordering schools and in-kind scholarships? No, Tennessee money never will be paid at any institution, including Western Kentucky or any bordering school to the state. Tennessee money can only be used in Tennessee, can never be used outside of Tennessee. Federal money will follow you anywhere you go because it's borderless as far as the states are concerned. Federal money will follow you, but state money will not. What I will say is that if your student graduates in May and he or she is Hope Scholarship eligible at the time of graduation, they can enroll in an out-of-state institution their freshman sophomore year, and as long as they keep the Hope eligibility requirements, and that is a 2.75 GPA for freshmen and sophomores, and they were continuously enrolled, they never took a semester off, they can transfer back to Tennessee and pick the Hope Scholarship back up. So it doesn't mean that they were asked to leave the institution. They just wanted to come home or go to a different school. That's fine as long as they didn't take a semester off, and as long as they have the required GPA, we will reissue the Hope Scholarship upon their return. If they leave the school again, that Hope institution, then it goes away forever. So just know that if they once they start to use it, if they stop, it goes away forever. We do have the one stipulation where if they go to out of state school first, they can come back as long as they have the GPA, they were continuously enrolled. And the last little nichey thing is they had to have attended a regionally accredited institution. They can't go to, I don't know, Cheryl's backcombing college in Virginia. It has to be a regionally accredited institution. Western Kentucky, Notre Dame, any of those institutions that are regionally accredited. So that way, all that will work out. So, and then last but not least, you have my contact information up here on your screen now. So let me go back here and get to your questions. Do you have to be accepted for the private scholarship? Talked about that. Do you know if UTA's got scholarships? Yes, I got to that one. For Hope, you have to attend a Tennessee school, correct? Yes, you do. Do all schools take Hope? I talked about that one. No, not necessarily. Did you say students have to actually register for classes before they can get the financial aid offer? No, they have to register for classes before they can receive the bill. So once you indicate you are going to go to a school, the financial aid package will then put together that bill. A bill can't be produced until they register for classes. You can still know what your projected aid is, but you're not going to receive that financial aid package until you register for classes, until they can generate a bill. You won't get that aid. You won't get the total aid package that shows fees, shows credits, shows the difference. Not until there's a bill to be able to set that mechanism up. But prior to that, you should still be able to access their account to see what aid is projected to hit their account from the institution. And the only way to do that is to get access to the student's information system, log into their financial aid portion of their student account, and you should be able to see inside that what that is. So you'll see it, but they don't disclose it to you until they send you the financial aid package. I hope that answered that question. My daughter's being recruited for archery. Archery scholarships are only available at smaller institutions. They don't offer her preferred major. Would this hurt her transferring? That's so specific, possibly. You got to make sure if she's going to attend an institution and have a major or study something, you want to make sure that those classes are generic enough where they could transfer and count to another institution before, like at a community college. Tennessee, we have programs called Tennessee Transfer Pathway Programs, TTP for short. So that's the program where your student can go to a community college for 2 years for free using Tennessee Promise. And I want to say there's like 40 or so majors that are Tennessee Transfer Pathway specific majors. If your student goes to community college, registers for one of those Tennessee Transfer Pathway programs, all those classes are guaranteed to transfer and count at a 4-year public institution in state, right? So it's possible where, because I can't speak for out-of-state schools, or I can only really speak confidently about in-state public institutions. Um, those classes tend to always transfer and count. Depending on the scenario, it could hurt transferring, but most times, as long as I've worked in higher ed, as long as the institution is accredited, most all of those classes always transfer and count for generic graduation credits. Like the students are allowed so many generic classes they can take, so many optional classes they can take, that will count towards graduation, and then they just got to make up their major specific classes. So I really can't get more specific than that because it's such a broad question, but you just want to make sure you've done your homework before you transfer. You say students have to register for class. Also, have the question off. This means if they go to one more orientation, if they go to more than one orientation, register for class at more than one student, so we can actually compare from that. Yes, more and more students. I just thumbed through that. I was reading your question. More and more students are attending multiple orientation sessions to actually compare schools. So if your student's interested in MTSU, Tennessee Tech, and Austin P, you can go to orientation sessions at all 3 of those schools. You can register for classes at all 3 of those schools, and all 3 of those schools can send you a financial aid package to where you then compare the costs between all 3 of those schools. You are not financially committed to the institution until your student goes to his or her first class. That is the moment you have signed, that student has signed the dotted line, and you've passed the point of no return. You can withdraw up until 6 a.m. before your very first 8 a.m. class and get 100% of your money back. But if you're registered for an 8 a.m. class, the first day of class, and once you go to that class, and even if you skip the class, they're going to charge you, so don't mess with it. Once you attend a course, you're financially responsible. You just donated 25% of the total tuition and fees to the school, no matter what. So make sure that you can withdraw, and it's best practice to withdraw, because if you withdraw from the institution, that frees up your financial aid that they can award to another student. But you don't have to. I mean, you really can just not go, and you're not going to be penalized, because schools cannot hold you financially responsible if you never went to a class. But it does get a little wonky if you don't go to a class, or if you have an online course, because they can mark you present for an online course, even if you didn't. I mean, so I would withdraw in this day and age to save yourself the headache. So yes, you can go to more than one orientation session so you can compare costs. Once you compare costs, you can then make your selection and withdraw from the other institutions and go all in on the one you've selected. Yes, I'm going to share these slides. Particularly, I will share the slides with the school counselors, who will then share them with your parents, because I don't think I have a mechanism with how you registered for tonight to send them to you individually, other than my email address is up on the screen. Any of you are welcome to email me, and I'll share my slide deck with you. So that I can do that. So when we're all said and done with, if you just want to email me, Dustin, send me your slides, I'll be happy to send them directly to you. That's fine. That's it directly to you rather than having to go through a counselor. My son's planning to do an associate's degree at Cumberland, which is a 4-year college. Would this fall under the 4-year or community college financial aid amount? Oh, really great question. So Tennessee Promise can only be used for students pursuing associate's degrees. So some 4-year colleges have associate's degree programs like Cumberland. So if your student chooses to go to Cumberland, he or she can only enroll in the associate's degree program, and the Tennessee Promise will only cover the costs for those associate's degree classes. They won't cover any bachelor's degree classes or any classes not covered under the program of study for the associate's degree. But what I will also say, this is where it really gets difficult or interesting depending on your perspective. Tennessee will only cover up to the cost of the corresponding community college. So in other words, the private schools and the private schools with associate's degree programs, and even your 4-year public schools with associate's degree programs, they can charge you more than the $2,500 that you would be charged to do the same program at a community college. And so if your tuition at Austin P for one of their associate degree programs is $3,500 a semester. We are only going to send $2,500 to the school, and you're going to be responsible for the difference. So you need to know that up front. Some schools, they should not miscommunicate that. They should not, but schools are funny. So make sure you're aware of, or you ask the question, hey, my student wants to go to your enroll in the associate degree program at your school. What is their tuition fee? How does their tuition fee compare to the associate degree programs at corresponding community colleges? And what's going to be your responsibility? Because I would think, and actually I know, it's above and beyond the 2,500 that we cover. So just make sure you know that before you hop into it. Okay. Please send meeting update for Wilson Central. I don't even remember. Let's see. Man, apparently I can't type when I'm anxious in front of everybody. Make sure you all check with your counselors whether or not they allow parents. Let's see. And now I'm going back up, going back up, going back up. My son, associate degree, got it. Meeting dates, got it. Invite, got it. Good job, Merrol. Good to see you back-to-back nights. We are grandparents, mother's deceased, father is not in the picture at all. How do we handle this? Grandson will be 18. If you have legal guardianship, that's one way. If you don't have legal guardianship, there's a question on the FAFSA that says, do unusual circumstances prevent my parents from submitting FAFSA information? You check yes. The school is going to ask your student a bunch of questions of why parents can't provide information. They answer those questions, and they will ultimately label your student independent, because grandparents, unless you've legally adopted, the grandparents will not create FSA IDs or submit FAFSAs. So if parents are unable to do it, there are mechanisms for that. I hope that was clear. Thank you, Dustin. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's say my son is accepted in 3 colleges. How do I compare financial aid packages? Is this sent in the acceptance letters? How will this work? You'll eventually get the 3 different financial aid packages, but that won't come until after you attend these orientation sessions. So if you're really interested in comparing apples and apples and costs, it takes a little bit of homework on your part. You can do it. You can go to each individual school's financial aid website, because again, by federal law, they have to disclose to you what the annual estimated cost of attendance is, and they will show you what those associated costs are. So that way, like if they're telling you on-campus housing is part of their estimated cost of attendance, but your student's living at home, you can subtract that out. So you can remove that from your own financial aid package. So you can begin to do your own work prior to the school sending it to you. But if you don't do that, they all will send you their packages, but you won't be able to do your own analysis until the summer, midsummer, and before the freshman year that starts. And so you may want to do that a little bit earlier than that. Acceptance letters will only have, typically, they will only show you in the acceptance letters what the guaranteed academic scholarship that the school is going to offer. So they've been admitted to Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech has, I don't know this, but every school has kind of like a low, middle, and high range ACT GPA guaranteed scholarship threshold, somewhere like 21, 26, 31, something like that. And depending on where your student is on that scale, they will then tell you what your guaranteed scholarship offer is at the school, and then you can apply for additional merit-based scholarships on top of that. But that's the only probably the only academic scholarship you're going to receive in the acceptance letter. You'll have to do your own little bit of homework prior to receiving the actual financial aid packages from each individual institution. Did you say the Hope Scholarship can be picked back up if attending an out-of-state for 2 years? My daughter plans to attend a college for 2 years, probably in Ohio or Kentucky, and then transfer back to Tennessee College after that. Yes. So your student can go to out-of-state school. It's got to be accredited. they can't take a semester off, and they have to maintain the minimum Hope GPA for that student's classification. So freshman, sophomore, 2.75, junior, senior is 3.0. Best rule of practice is just to get to a 3.0, stay to 3.0, so that way you don't have any hiccups. As long as you've gone to an out-of-state school and you've kept, and it's credited, you've kept your minimum GPA and you haven't taken a semester off, you can come back to Tennessee and pick the Hope back up. As you said, FAFSA will use the 2024 income, but what do we do if there was a drop happen on the household income, layoff of work? Do we notify FAFSA? Great question. So you can fix a dramatic, life-changing financial event, but you can't fix it on the front end. So in other words, anybody out there that is submitting the 26-27 FAFSA with your 2024 information. In 2024, if you're making $600,000 a year and now you're making $40,000 a year, you have to go to the school that your student's attending, schedule an appointment with the financial aid officer at the school, and you got to file what's called a FAFSA adjustment. And so they're going to ask you for some information. Some of that information is going to include either a copy of your most recent copy of your W-2 or your 2025 return. If you produce those documents to the school and they see the dramatic change in income, they will go back in and do their beeps and bops and update your income, and which will change your SAI and the award amount that you could be eligible for. So you can't fix it on the front end. You got to file the FAFSA as it existed in 2024, but as soon as it's done, you can schedule an appointment with the financial aid officer, go to the school, submit what's called a FAFSA adjustment, and they can fix that for you on the back end. Great question. Tennessee Chiefs meeting. Got it. And I think that's everything. Going once, going twice. Any other generic questions? If anybody wants to unmute, if anybody wants to chat it in, I'll hang around. If anybody, I don't think I can hop to a breakout room and come back if there's an individual question. Thank you all so much for the evening. You're welcome to email me or call me at that number anytime for any kind of clarification, but I'll hang around for a few minutes to see if there's anybody that needs anything. But you all have been great. Thank you so much. Have a good, safe night. All the stuff. I'm going to turn the record off and then hang out in case anybody needs me.